What's up, guys? Welcome to Making Houston Home. My name is Rene, Lara, and I have been in Houston for 5 years now, and this is going to be kind of my 5-year update and give you all of the knowledge, everything that I've acquired over the last 5 years living here in Houston. So, first thing we're going to do, I'm going to talk about my story a little bit. I've never, I show all these homes on my channel. I kind of do everything as a realtor, right? But I've never really talked about my story, only with those of y'all that have reached out to me, and we kind of go back and forth why we're moving to Houston, why you're thinking about it, what you want, what your goals are. And I get into it in those discussions, and it has a lot of value in it. So what we're going to do, I'm going to give you my story first, and then we're going to jump into the details about the things we love, things we don't love about Houston. So we're going to talk about the lifestyle here in Houston. So being from Southern California, both my wife and I were born and raised in LA. We lived in South Orange County for about 8 years before we moved out here to Houston. So the lifestyle, how does it compare to a Southern California lifestyle? Where do we go eat? What do we do? Where do we go? The hotels we stay at downtown or in the Woodlands, kind of all the stuff we like to do around the area. Then we're going to jump into some more information about schools. So one of the big questions I get asked, people moving here, especially people that have kids, obviously, what about the school system? In California, a lot of people I knew went to private school. So if they're coming out here now, they're probably going to be going to public school because the public school system is really, really great. So I'm actually going to pull up a map, show you these school district ratings in these suburbs around Houston. Really great schools. I'm going to show you that. We're going to talk about expenses too. So there's a lot of unknown expenses, that things we didn't have to worry about when we were in California owning our homes there, and things that we do have to worry about and budget for being out here in Houston. So something that you really, really want to stick around for, because there are some unexpected costs being here that we didn't even think about. So expenses. Then we're going to get into weather. One of the biggest questions I get, how did you adapt coming from SoCal, where it's sunny, great, everything's beautiful all the time, to the heat here, the humidity, the hurricanes, the flooding, all the things we have to deal with here. So how was that adapting to the weather here compared to where we're from in Southern California? Then the last thing we're going to talk about, friends, right? So something people don't really think about, but it is heavy on your heart. Who are you going to do life with here? What's it like? What's that experience like? Because when my wife and I moved here, we had no friends, no family. It was just the two of us and our kids, who were only 1 and 2 at the time. So now our kids are in elementary school. They're doing a lot of activities. We've made a lot of friends through their school, through their activities, through our church. So just kind of talking through kind of the emotional roller coaster around feeling alone for so many years when we first moved out here, right? So getting into details on that as well. But let's go ahead, jump right into this thing. We're going to start with kind of our story, beginning to end, on when we first thought about moving out here. So let's go ahead and jump into it right now. All right, so our story. I wish my wife was here with me, but she does not want to be in any of my videos. But one day I'm going to get her in these videos, because she's a lot more entertaining than I am. I'm the boring one in the relationship, and she's awesome and fun, and she would be awesome on these videos. But one day I'm going to get her in here, y'all can see her. But our story, so kind of going back, as I mentioned, we were both born and raised in LA. My wife's from the Torrance area. I'm from Gardena. We went to high school together. That's when we started dating. We've been together since then. Spare you all those details. Kind of, in 2010 was when we bought our first house down in Orange County. So we left LA, we went down to Orange County. We were kind of thinking ahead. We wanted to raise our kids. Back then, Orange County was a little bit different. So we wanted to raise our kids in Orange County. We moved down there. We lived there for about 8 years, but that was 2010. 2016 was when we had our firstborn. 2017, the next year, we had our daughter, so that's our 2 kids. And then that's kind of when our priorities shifted as parents. So, we lived the whole Southern California lifestyle, doing all the stuff, everything's there, it's great, it's beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Once we had kids, we started thinking differently. We started looking into schools for them, and we both were working full time. I used to work for ExxonMobil, so if you're familiar with Exxon. I used to work there in Torrance at the Torrance refinery. So I used to commute from Orange County to Torrance every day, which was a long commute. And then my wife does hair. She's a hairstylist. So we actually owned a hair salon down in Orange County right around the same time we had our 2 kids. So there was a lot going on from 2016 to 2018 when we moved here. We had 2 kids. We started a business. I was working full time. We had a ton going on, right? And after we had our children, we kind of started looking at life differently and saying, okay, we got to start prioritizing our kids, prioritizing our relationship, our marriage. And we just felt like being in that era, that Southern California lifestyle, it was just always go, 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 go. We never really got a chance to slow down. So we actually talked about moving to Texas a couple years before we had kids. But things didn't work out. We were trying to have kids. Just little nugget about us. Both of our kids are IVF kids. So we went through that for a few years before we actually had our kids. So we got 2 blessings and we are grateful for it. But, so when they were born, we really wanted to focus on our family and having the business, both of us working full time. It was just a lot going on. So we looked into me being in the oil industry and Houston being the oil capital of the country, basically. It was pretty easy for me to transfer out here to Houston and get a job in the oil industry here. So, one of the things, actually, I mention it all the time when y'all reach out to me and we talk. I remember the day that we really had the serious conversation about it, because my wife was pregnant, I believe, with our daughter. Our daughter might have just been born, and we were trying to find like a Montessori school, somewhere to send our son, who was still only 1.5. He was under 2, to be taken care of, like a daycare, so that we both work and run our business and doing everything we were doing. And we went, and just for him to go part-time, I remember it was like almost $2,000 a month just for like 2 or 3 days a week. It was something insane. And I remember coming home and we were sitting on the couch in our house and we kind of just looked at each other and we were like, what are we doing? Like, honestly, what is happening right now? Like, what are we doing? We're slaving our lives away, like, just to like live here. And so we started looking at homes out here in Houston. We started kind of doing the math on, the numbers of what my wife could make here, what I could make here, what our expenses would be cut like in half. And then things just kind of started to make more and more sense as we looked into it more and more. And then ultimately, I applied for the job out here. I ended up being able to get transferred. Everything worked out. We bought our home here. It all worked out well. And we made the move. So we actually drove here from California the week of our daughter's first birthday. So our daughter turned 1. We had her birthday party literally like 3 days later. We were on the road coming out here to Houston. So a little nugget of information too, based on our experience, if you have little kids, we broke the trip up, the drive coming from Southern California, from Orange County. It's a 24-hour drive getting out here to Houston. So we broke it up in 3 days. We did 2 10-hour days and then 1 4-hour day just getting into Houston early that morning. So we had the full day to kind of get the kids set up in their rooms, kind of unpack, get situated for that first night we were going to be in our home, right? So we stopped in New Mexico. I believe it was Las Cruces, New Mexico. The first night, that was about 10 hours from where we were. Second stop was in San Antonio, which was about 10 hours from there. And then from San Antonio into Houston was about 3.5, 4 hours, if I remember correctly. But good information there, because a lot of people drive from Southern California that I talk to. If you have older kids or maybe you're by yourself, you can split it up into 12-hour days, no problem. If you got young kids, you can't do a whole 12 hours or more in the car with them. The way we broke it up like that actually worked out pretty well, and it wasn't terrible. I mean, the kids were still crying and it was a mess, but it probably would have been worse if we tried to do it in 2 days. But a little bit of tidbit of information there based on our experience of actually making the move out here. But overall, that's really our story. We got here in July of 2018 and it was hot. So we got to the house. We took a picture in front of the house because, we finally made it. We were here in Houston, ready to kind of get the ball rolling on our life here in Houston. And we really haven't looked back. It's been awesome for our kids. It's been awesome for our marriage. It's just been great all around, and we love it here in Houston. Next up, we have the lifestyle here, right? So being from Southern California, again, growing up in LA, Orange County area, there's a ton of stuff to do all the time. The weather's beautiful all the time. You can be outdoors. You can do whatever you want pretty much 24/7, 365 out there in Southern California, right? So coming to Houston, how did that change? What are the things that we like to do now? You know, what's it like actually living here, which is something we talk about on these calls when y'all reach out to me, because there's a lot of questions around that, right? And one thing that's funny, as I was preparing for this video, I asked my wife, I was like, you know, when you think back to when we were thinking about moving, like what were the big topics for you that you wanted to know about or what you were wondering about? And the two things she said is, she was like, well, I just needed to know where Target is and the grocery store. And I started laughing because those two things didn't even cross my mind, but those were her two big worries. So speaking of that real quick, there's Targets everywhere and there's grocery stores everywhere. There's H-E-B, which is the best grocery store on planet Earth. If you come out here to visit in Houston, you gotta go to H-E-B. I've never hyped up a grocery store in my life, but I love H-E-B. I go to H-E-B just like if I'm bored at home one day, I'm like, man, I'm gonna go to H-E-B and just see what they have today. It's basically the grocery store version of Target. Like you go there for a couple things, $300 later, you're leaving, right? But again, Target's everywhere too. So if you're worried about that, like my wife was, you got them everywhere, so don't worry about it. But other than that, you know, our kids' activities, right? A lot of people reach out to me that have kids. They ask about sports. They ask about dance if they have kids in dance, swim, all kinds of different stuff. So for us personally, we live up on the northeast side of Houston in a little place called Kingwood. And, you know, our son does music class. He does swim over summer. He does karate here. So he has all of his activities. Our daughter, she does ballet, she does hip hop, she loves dance and all things creative. So she does those things as well. You know, speaking to downtown area, right? So we're about 30 minutes from downtown. What's great about Houston is you have all these suburbs kind of on the outskirts of town, but it's not a bad drive to get into town because there's so many different freeways, so many different routes getting in there. So, you know, we go to the zoo, the Houston Zoo. We take our kids down to the zoo. It's about 40 minutes from us, so it's not a terrible drive. But we've been there multiple times since we moved out here. Our kids love it. It's cool just to go walk around. Probably not the best thing to do when it's height of summertime and it's like 1,000,000 degrees outside, because you do not want to be walking around the zoo when it's that hot, and all the animals aren't doing anything anyway because they're out there practically just laying there halfway dead probably. But not the best thing to do during summertime, but when it does cool off in these cooler months, it's nice to get out there and just kind of walk around, have a good time with the family. We have the aquarium downtown also. Similar thing, it has, most of it is indoors. The actual aquarium is indoors, and then there's an outside facility too with rides and kind of games and things to do out there. So probably want to stay more in the cooler months to go visit the aquarium too with your kids. But another cool experience there. As far as like, so for my wife and I think I already mentioned, we've been together since high school. We lived our 20s together, early 30s. We've done a lot and we actually enjoy each other's time. So it's really cool having that. And we like to go out. We like to go downtown and stay the night. We like to go to the Woodlands and stay the night. So some of our favorite places we like to go. So downtown, if we're gonna go spend the evening there, have a nice dinner, stay over, there's a hotel called the C. Baldwin. We've stayed there a couple times. Probably our favorite hotel downtown is the Marriott Marquis. You might have heard of it before. That one, that's the one with the big Texas shaped lazy river. It's awesome, but it's like almost like a mini Vegas, if you will. There's like a whole adult section with the bar, and you know, everyone's just out there. They got a DJ. It's just a good time to kind of go spend a day or two out there and just sort of let loose when we feel like we need to do that. So Marriott Marquis downtown is cool. And then obviously, you know, you got the Rockets, you got Houston Dynamo, which is the soccer team. And then the biggest thing, right, for all Houstonians, the Astros. So if you're a Dodgers fan, don't click off this video yet, but the Astros are where it's at out here. If you're going to be coming out here, it's a good time, honestly. You know, my family, being from LA, they're all Dodgers fans, right? So I like to give them a hard time just because it's all fun. But coming out to Minute Maid, you got to go to the park. It's super cool. You know, when it's hot out, they close that dome up. And it's just a really great experience. If you're a baseball fan in general, it's a really great experience coming to these games. And even if you're not an Astros fan, people out here, it's really Southern hospitality at its best. You don't need to be rooting for the Astros. Nobody's going to throw stuff at you. Nobody's going to pour their drink on you. You're not going to get in a fight. Everybody's just out here having a good time, and it's a very great atmosphere being at those Astros games. And we like to go too. It's really fun. We'll go out there with friends every once in a while, but really good time. Also downtown, you have the Houston Ballet, which we've been to once. Wasn't really our scene, to be honest, but we went and tried it out anyway, and it was cool. So if you're into that, we do have the Houston Ballet. We took our daughter just this past year in June for her birthday to see Wicked downtown. So, you got all the Broadway shows, you have all that stuff. There's a ton to do in Houston. And like I said, if you live in any of these suburbs around Houston, you're there in 30, 45 minutes. So it's not a bad drive getting to and from downtown. One of the other places we love to frequent, like I said, we live on the northeast side. We are in the Woodlands a lot. Probably our favorite place to go to being out here is up in the Woodlands. So place we stay at in the Woodlands. So you have the Woodlands Mall, you have Market Street, you have the Cynthia Woods Pavilion, which is like a big concert center. So if you've ever been to the Hollywood Bowl, if you're from Southern California, basically it's our version of the Hollywood Bowl. It's like an outdoor concert hall, essentially, is what it is. So it's really cool. And then right there, like smack dab in the middle of all this stuff, you have a bunch of hotels right along the waterway. And the waterway is basically, you have the lake, you have like a little waterway that runs through everything. You can walk down the waterway to get everywhere. It's really pretty. Ton of restaurants, ton of bars, great restaurants too. So a lot of your more high-end stuff you're gonna find in the Woodlands. So a lot of, you got Perry Steakhouse, you got a ton of stuff. There's a North Italia at the mall. I wouldn't consider PF Chang's high-end, but there's a PF Chang's. The mall has everything. There's an In-N-Out that just opened up last year. So go there all the time as well. But ton of stuff to do in the Woodlands. And like I said, where we're in Kingwood, we're about 30 minutes to the Woodlands, 25 minutes maybe. So again, not a bad drive getting to the Woodlands, not a bad drive getting to downtown either. What else is there? Kind of speaking to, trying to think of some other questions y'all asked me when we're on the phone. But kind of speaking to like the Target, the grocery store thing, right? So we talked about downtown, talked about the Woodlands. You have like your areas that are more like, I'm not touristy, but more attraction type areas, right? We're going to go to the zoo. We're going to go to an Astros game. We're going to go to a concert at the Cynthia Woods Pavilion. Outside of that, each little suburb in Houston, you're going to have everything you need. And they do a really great job about setting up these developments that way. So like where we live in Kingwood, we have what's called the Kingwood Town Center. So we have our H-E-B, our grocery stores, our like mom and pop restaurants, shops, things like that. So where we are, my wife calls it our little bubble. Like we literally don't really have to leave our little bubble. We have everything we need unless we're going to go to like a destination spot, right? So same thing. You have that same kind of setup in Cypress, Katy, Sugarland, Pearland, like all these little subdivisions and towns around Houston. You're going to have that same type of setup. So you don't really have to drive downtown. You don't have to drive to the Woodlands. You're going to have everything you need right there. But overall, that's basically the lifestyle. Like I said, there's a ton of stuff to do. I kind of touched on little things here and there, but it is a huge sprawling city out here in Houston and the surrounding area. So whatever you enjoy, if you like to hike, if you like to be outdoors, you like to bike, you like to do, there's something for everybody here in Houston. It's such a massive city, but depending on the lifestyle that you want to live, that's one of the conversations we have when you reach out to me about moving out here. I always ask, tell me about yourself, tell me about things you like to do. And as you're talking, I'm taking mental notes like, okay, this area has that, this area doesn't, and we'll really break it down and figure out where you would fit in or where you would actually want to live right here in the Houston area. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is schools, right? So again, for us, schools were extremely important. Being from LA area where we grew up, both my wife and I were fortunate enough to go to private school. We got a really good education in our private school, right? So growing up, having children of our own, that was kind of our plan in California, was to put our kids through private school. But it's a huge expense at the same time, right? So as I mentioned before, when we started looking in, just like for a daycare for our son, it was extremely expensive, something we didn't really want to do. We probably could have if we had to, but we didn't really want to add that expense on, right? So thinking about moving out here to Houston, we said, okay, if we're gonna do this, we have to do right by our children and make sure that they're in a great public school system. Another expense that we're not gonna have to worry about moving out here to Houston, right? It's gonna save us a lot of money in the long run. So what do? Probably the same thing you did that happened upon this video. We started Googling best school districts in Houston, right? So I'm gonna save you all the headache of trying to figure all that out yourself and pull up this one map right here. So this is according to niche.com. This is actually 2023's top rated school districts in the Houston area. So as you can see, I'll kind of start up here on the north side. So we live right here. This is Kingwood, and we are part of Humble ISD. So Kingwood has all of your A-rated, highly rated schools in Humble ISD. This also encompasses Atascocita, Humble area too, which are also some good schools. One thing to note too, if you're thinking about the Woodlands, Conroe area, the Woodlands is actually in Conroe ISD. So Conroe ISD encompasses all this whole area right here, not just in the city of Conroe. You also have the Woodlands. But kind of just a big picture. As you can see, you can basically just throw a dart anywhere around Houston, in these suburbs around Houston, and you're gonna have a great school district. So if schools are a priority, something that's a big consideration for you and your family, there are a ton of options, as you can see, basically around this whole circle. So the way Houston is set up, you have loops, right? So this is the 610 loop. You have downtown Houston, you have the 610 loop. You can see there's nothing highly rated according to niche.com in that loop, right? Then you kind of get out, you have the Beltway 8 loop, and then you're gonna have some more there. So you have some of these suburbs that are kind of built around this Beltway 8 loop. The only one inside of there, we got a couple. This area right here, Spring Branch ISD, Hunters Creek Village. This is a beautiful, beautiful area. Hunters Creek Village has like multi-million-dollar homes. So if that's something you're looking for, go ahead and reach out to me. We can talk about this specific area. And what's cool is it's beautiful, great schools, beautiful, gorgeous estates right here. And you're close to town too. So if you like to kind of feel like you're secluded, private, have your own estate right here in this little area with good schools for your children, but still be super close to downtown, that's a great option right here in this area. And there's a couple more areas too that are going to be $1 million or less, high, 800-900s around here too. Really, really great area. But for the most part, for most people that kind of want to be on the outskirts, that are in more of like your average price point for the Houston area, which is about $420,000 right now for average sale price, you're going to be out here in between this Beltway 8 loop and this 99 loop. So as you can see, you got Katy over here, A-rated school districts. You got Cypress up here. Cypress, Fairbanks kind of encompasses this whole area. You got Tomball. We talked about Conroe, the Woodlands. Down on this side, you got Sugarland. Down here, you got Pearland, Friendswood, League City, LaPorte. Up this way, you have Baytown, Mont Bellevue area over here, Crosby. Dayton and Liberty are kind of on the outskirts. There's a lot of new development going on in this area right now as well. But like I said, for the most part, if schools are on the top of your priority list, you can pretty much be anywhere. And then this kind of segues back into lifestyle. So as I have these conversations, when y'all reach out to me, this is something we will go over. You say, well, yeah, we want good schools. And then it's like, okay, well, what type of lifestyle do you live? Because Friendswood is going to be completely different than Cypress, and the Woodlands is going to be completely different than Katy, so it kind of just depends on the lifestyle you want to live, and you can pretty much almost pick anywhere you want to be if the schools are really on that top of that list for you. All right, so what's next? The big thing, the dollar signs, right? The expenses. What have we learned over the last 5 years about expenses out here in Houston? So unexpected costs, things we planned for. And then after this, we're going to get into the last two, which are weather and friends, right? So going through expenses, when we were thinking about moving here, which is probably what you're doing right now if you're watching this, we had our mortgage, our cars, we had all of our expenses there. in California, plus our business and gas and all kinds of stuff, right? Groceries, you kind of have the same type of expenses, right? You're gonna have a mortgage, you gotta pay for gas, you gotta pay for groceries, you're gonna have all that same type of stuff. It's just amazing how much less expensive it is here in Houston compared to California anyway. So, you know, one of the big expenses that was literally cut in half when we moved here was our mortgage payment. So even with taxes and insurance included, we are literally paying half of what we were paying in California. So that was a big incentive for us coming out here, right? And then we looked at gas. When we moved out here, gas was about $2.40, $2.50 a gallon. Again, that was back in 2018. But even now, I think I just paid $3.09 the other day. It's been hovering right around $3 a gallon. Yeah, it was yesterday. I filled up, it was $3.09. But so gas, I remember in California, that was like something we had to budget for monthly, and it was like $500 to $700 a month that we were spending in gas. And I was commuting. You know, like I said, I worked up in Torrance in LA basically, but we lived in South Orange County. So I was commuting a lot. So gas was a big expense for us. Groceries, obviously, you got 2 kids, a family of 4. That was a big expense for us. Groceries here are like almost half what we used to spend out there for whatever reason. I don't really know why, but it's just cheaper here than it was out there. But some of the unexpected costs are kind of things that we got sticker shock on. And I'm going to put this all out there so you know things to consider when you're thinking about making the move out here that we didn't necessarily know, because we didn't, you know, back then this YouTube thing wasn't a thing. We didn't really know until we were like in the thick of it and kind of just figuring all this stuff out. One of the biggest expenses that kind of shocked me, and it's actually been getting worse as time has gone on, homeowners insurance. So California, I think our homeowners insurance was like $600-700 a year. It was something like so small that we didn't even really like, it just got added onto the mortgage. It was like, didn't even have to think about it. When we moved here in 2018, I remember our policy we had back then was $2,400 a year. So it was $200 a month added onto our mortgage, right? But over time, these last few years, with kind of the more natural disasters and things happening, a lot of your big insurance companies aren't writing policies off the Gulf Coast anymore. So what we're seeing is a really big increase in homeowners insurance, and it's actually kind of hurting a lot of people right now. So put that out there, something to think about when you're moving out here. So for example, for us, you know, our rate was $2,400. Now, just this last year, it jumped all the way up to $3,900 a year. So we're paying over $300 a month now for homeowners insurance. So really something to consider, because again, being from California, it wasn't something we had to think about, but being out here now, that's really something we got to budget for and plan for every single year. Hopefully we can get some relief and these insurance companies can figure something out to help people out, but really big expense there that you really got to plan for. The other thing attached to your biggest expense, which is usually the mortgage for people, is property taxes. So, you know, in California, we were in a new development, so we had what was called a Mello-Roos tax. So we were paying around 2.7%, I think. You know, and our house was twice as much as our house here is. So for us, we actually saved a lot of money, because where we live in Kingwood, we're about a 2.5% tax rate. But our house, again, is literally half the cost of what our house was in California. So for us, we saved money. But if you're in an area, you know, like in California, and you're 1%, like most people are, and you're paying 1%, even if it's like $1 million home, you know, it's $10,000 a year. One thing to consider, $1 million home here, if you're in like a 2.5%, 3% tax rate, do the math, you're talking 20-30 grand a year in taxes, right? So that's really what gets a lot of people when you're looking at these big stately homes out here and you're like, oh my God, look what I can get for $1 million compared to what I can get for $1 million in California. That, you know, it sounds like it's even for even, right? It's $1 million here, $1 million there. But when you put property taxes into it, insurance into it, that $1 million here is exponentially more expensive than $1 million there. So you got to keep that in mind too. Good thing about that is if you're comparing $1 million in California to like 400,000 in here, you're gonna get way more for 400,000 out here than you would get for $1 million in Southern California, like where I grew up, for example. So kind of segueing into some of the more personal expenses around the home, right? So a lot of people, when they're coming out here, they're seeing these big stately homes on big lots with the pool, 2 stories. You have all of these beautiful homes, right? But with that comes additional expenses that you have to be concerned about for maintaining that home, right? So for us, our home in California was about 2,000 square feet. It was new construction. We didn't really have to worry about too much with that home. Only had one AC unit. You know, telling you the truth, our electricity bill here is actually the same as it was in California, because California's electricity was about 3 times the cost as it is here. So here we're using probably 3 times as much energy, but the cost is so much less that it's kind of a wash for us. So, you know, speaking of that, we personally have a 3,200 square foot home. We have a pool with 2 pool pumps that are running every day. We have 2 AC units on the house. We have another AC unit on our garage. We got 2 kids that are charging iPads. We got TVs and all that stuff running all the time. So those are expenses when it comes to utilities that you're gonna have to remember with these bigger homes. There's gonna be more expenses around that. And then speaking to, for example, if you have a pool, you're going to be filling that, especially during summertime. I fill my pool probably once a week during summertime, so that water bill usually gets pretty high during summertime when it's hot out here. Have to water the grass more. You know, if you buy a home with a big lot and you want your grass to be nice and green, you're going to be watering it a lot. So you got to remember those water bills can really add up during those summer months. And then kind of just general home maintenance. So with the weather here, which this will actually segue into this weather part pretty well, but with the weather here, the humidity, everything's moist. I hate that word, but moisture in the air. One of the things, the exterior of the home, especially if you have like wood siding, one very, very common thing, especially if people are moving here and you get a home inspection done, you'll see every single house, unless it's new construction, you're gonna have wood rot. You're gonna have, you know, the eaves from your roof are gonna have wood rot. Siding's gonna have wood rot. It's just something that happens here because of the atmosphere that we live in Houston. So for example, we've been here for 5 years, starting to notice some more of that around our house. So it's about time that we need to go through and kind of redo, tear out all that wood rot, redo our eaves, redo our siding around the house, stuff like that. So that's an additional expense. In California, we didn't have to really worry about that because that just didn't happen. But being out here in Houston, that's something you got to consider as well. And then that'll segue straight into the next thing. I feel like I'm forgetting something around expenses. There's just a bunch of stuff. Talked about gas, homeowners insurance, property taxes. If I forgot something, let me know in the comments and I'll answer it. So if you can think of something right now that I didn't talk about, put it in the comments and I'll go ahead and answer your question in there. But let's go ahead and jump on to weather right now. Okay, so weather. One of the biggest questions I get, people always ask, is it really that hot during summer? Are these storms and hurricanes and stuff really that bad? Is the flooding that bad? Short answer, yes, it's scary at first. But being here for 5 years now, the storms that used to scare us when we first moved here, it's just kind of normal now. We know what's coming, you know how to deal with it. Being from Southern California again, the way people compare it here, like if you say, well, you guys have hurricanes, people are like, well, you got earthquakes. It's kind of the same thing. Like being from California, you just knew earthquakes were going to happen every now and then. Like it would happen. Maybe you're sleeping, you wake up and be like, oh, that was an earthquake. Yeah, everything's good. All right, we're good to go. No problem. You go back to sleep, right? It's sort of the same thing here. Like if there's a hurricane coming or a big storm, you kind of know what to do around your house. Maybe, unplug your drains if they are. Like you kind of just get ready for it. And then it happens and, then it passes and you're like, okay, well, that wasn't that bad. Or maybe it was that bad that time. But one of the big things to note too, a lot of people worry about flooding, right? And what I've learned being here now and knowing people from all around the city of Houston is any place in Houston, since we're so close to the Gulf, especially if there's a hurricane coming through, it kind of just depends on where it dumps the most water, where it's gonna flood or could possibly flood. So there's really there are certain areas that are in the floodplains where you're likely to flood, but even outside of the floodplain, you'll see, not that they flood and they're like 10 feet underwater, but you'll see streets flooding, things like that, and kind of rivers just running down the street. But it's again, it's kind of just something you learn to adapt to and you learn to live with. So now, if there's a hurricane coming or a big storm coming, a lot of times they'll shut down the schools, so your kids will be home. You kind of get your house, you get settled in where you're at, and just let it pass, right? Like, it's going to come through, it's going to pass. It might be bad, it might not be bad. Trees might fall, things might happen, but you just sort of learn to live with it. It just becomes part of your life, and it's just a natural occurrence that happens. You get through it and you move on, right? So kind of speaking towards hurricanes, those thunderstorms, things like that. But the biggest thing a lot of people ask about is summertime heat. Is the humidity that bad? Is it really that hot? And the answer is yes. It's hot. It's miserable during basically like August, September. You don't want to be outside out here in Houston because it's not just 95, 100 degrees, but it's like 100% humidity. And it's literally like just standing in a sauna and you're just sweating. You step outside and you're just sweating like immediately. One of the funny things is, like, if you wear glasses, you walk outside, it's so humid at times, you walk outside and your glasses literally fog up. Like, that's how humid it is here. So if you're from an environment that isn't that humid, it might be a little bit difficult to adjust to it. But for the most part, I used to work outdoors when I worked for ExxonMobil in the oil industry, and you couldn't get away from it. That was my job. I had to be outside. We had to take mandatory water breaks and this and that, and you learn to kind of keep yourself cool. But now, for the most part, I work from home in my office. I'm out showing houses. I'm not really outside working physically anymore. And the honest truth is most people aren't. A lot of people work from home, so you're not really spending that much time outside anyway. So a lot of people really look forward to those months where it cools off, and then that's when everybody's out running and riding bikes and going to the zoo and kind of like trying to get everything you can get in during these beautiful times. So basically, to kind of let you know, from right around June, May, it starts to warm up a little bit, but June is really when summer starts to hit and you're like, okay, it's hot. July is like, okay, it's still hot. And then August, September are like, okay, it's way too hot. And then coming into October is kind of hit or miss. We've had Halloweens where it was like freezing cold outside. We had to like bundle our kids up underneath their costumes for Halloween. But we've also had Halloweens where it was super hot outside. So October's kind of hit or miss, but usually coming into November, then it starts to cool off and it's actually really, really pretty outside. Then you got December, January, February are our cold months. So people ask about that too. So what we've learned over the last 5 years, it does get cold. It gets below freezing every once in a while, but for the most part, it's going to be 40 into the high 30s. So it gets cold. It does get really cold. And the cold here is kind of like, if you've ever heard the term like bone chilling, like I remember we'd have 40-degree weather in Southern California. You put sweatpants on, a sweatshirt, you kind of bundle up and you're okay. Here, for whatever reason, 40 degrees is like, it cuts through your clothes and like literally you can feel it in your bones. So it's just a different type of cold. But again, coming out of those summer months, nobody even cares because it's like we're just ready to not be sweating all day, every day. So coming into January and February, then the last few years, we had a couple of freezes come through, which was weird for Texas. It snowed in Houston a couple years ago. So I'm sure you saw that on the news where basically the whole state got hit with this freeze and it was ugly for a while. People lost power for weeks at a time. Where we live out here, we were fine. We never lost power, never lost water. We had a pipe burst over our garage because it froze, but we've since had that stuff replaced. And now a lot of people pay more attention to that kind of stuff. Make sure your piping's well insulated, things like that. If you can put PEX piping, a lot of new construction homes, they're doing PEX piping now so that it doesn't break if there is a freeze. So just kind of people are on alert more now that there's been those weird freezes over the last few years, just in case it happens again. But getting back into the seasons, coming through that cold season, right around March, April, May are just beautiful because you come out of that cold season, everything was kind of dormant during those cold months. So grass usually dies, trees kind of go dormant. And then come March, April, when spring hits, it is beautiful here. So grass is green, flowers are blooming. Weather's nice. It's 70 something degrees. That's kind of the months where it reminds me of Southern California. You can actually open up your windows and get some nice breeze coming through. And we have a few weeks where it's like beautiful outside. But it really actually makes you appreciate those times too, because you know, everybody looks forward to it. Everybody's outside having a good time doing their thing. But spring, absolutely beautiful here. So overall, you know, trying to think of some other stuff that has to do with weather. You know, for the most part, it's just like anything else. If you were to move to New York and you have those snowy months and you're not used to that, you're going to adapt to it. If you're from the Caribbean or something where you are familiar with humidity and all that stuff, it's just going to be the same for you. If you're from Florida, it's very similar to Florida. So, you know, people adapt. If it's something you want to do, something you feel like you can make work, then you're going to make it work. If it's something where you feel like, nah, I can't live with the heat, I can't live with the humidity, might not be the right place for you, right? So it just depends on each individual person. But just like anything else, you adapt, you learn to live with it, and you move on. So that was weather. We'll move on to this last thing, which is friends. Where are we going to make friends? What are we going to do? We got to do life with somebody. How's all that work out there? All right. So as I mentioned before, you know, my wife and I moved out here. It was just the two of us and our two kids, who were only 1 and 2 years old at the time. We had no friends, no family. We didn't know anyone, right? So we just kind of made the move, leap of faith. We're doing it. We're just going to see what happens, right? So honestly, the first couple of years, we didn't really have any friends. I was always at work. I was still in the oil industry, so I was always at work. You know, my wife was home by herself with our 1 and 2 year old, you know, then they're 2 and 3, 3 and 4, whatever. So as you can imagine, if you are a mother yourself, you get to a point where you're like, can I just talk to someone that is not 3 years old and actually have an adult conversation, go to dinner with somebody else, like just do something, right? So we had a lot of that experience, right? So it was rough having the little ones, and you know, they weren't really in activities, they weren't really in school yet. You know, there was a lot to work through during those times. But as now they've gotten older, now they're 6 and 7, they're both in elementary school, they're both in activities. We found a great church where we have kind of a core group that we meet up with and sort of just do life with. So, and what's actually really funny is just over time, those other 3 couples that we met actually moved to our same neighborhood. So they were in different parts of Houston, and just over time, you know, God's kind of put it in all of our path, and now we're literally within 30 seconds, 30-second drive of each other. Our kids are going to the same school, so they're all friends. They have sleepovers. It's just been an awesome thing that God has really put in our path and in our life. And you know, going through those tough years where we really had nobody to talk to or nobody to relate to and all that, really kind of bringing it all together now a few years later has been awesome for us. So just to kind of speak to where we meet people, right? So like this core group we met at church. They were part of our life group, and so we became friends through Christ, really, and sort of have been building those relationships over the last couple of years. Outside of that, kids' activities, right? So now they're in elementary school. You know, we have our park and pool just down the street. So we take the kids to the park. You see parents hanging out at the park talking. We have a swim team every summer right here in our little subdivision. So our kids are both on the swim team. So they make friends on the swim team. Naturally, parents are there. Parents start talking. You meet people. Maybe you gravitate towards certain people more than others, but you meet friends that way. And what's really, really cool, like I know I mentioned before, my daughter does ballet. She does dance. My son does music. He also does karate. So he just started karate, but he's kind of talking to other little kids there. And while I'm there, you know, there's another dad that I just kind of started talking to randomly one day. But the more you're here, the more you live here, the more you get out, the more you do things, you're just going to naturally meet people in your neighborhood. You're going to meet people at activities. You're going to meet people at a restaurant. It's just kind of the way life works, right? So for us, being totally honest, like I said, the first few years were kind of rough, but it was actually good for my wife and I, because we got to get out of that like California lifestyle of just go, 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 and kind of like step back and focus on our kids and our family and our relationships. So it was really great for us to have that time together. And then now we've sort of been building these other relationships, other people to do life with, right, as people say. So first thing I would say, find a good church, find some great people to surround yourself with that are going to support you and push you in the right direction. And then outside of that, you're going to have, if you have kids, your kids' activity, great place to meet other parents, other people that are in kind of the same season of life that you are, right? If your kids are about the same age, generally speaking, you're kind of going to be going through the same type of thing as those people. So great to connect with people at those places as well. But, you know, overall, great place. The number one thing that I love about Houston is the people. It is Southern hospitality. People are just super nice. Everywhere you go, people just want to talk to you. We meet people everywhere, honestly. You can be at a restaurant, you know, me and my wife go to a restaurant, we're sitting at the bar, we talk to the people next to us, and it's just like, hey, how's it going? You know, what you end up telling like your whole life story to these people and you just met 5 minutes ago. And there's no like, it's just like, okay, see, on your way. There's no like, you know, in California or Southern California, I guess it was like, anytime somebody talked to you, it was almost like they just wanted something from you. So everybody's like, dude, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you. Like, what are you even looking at me for? Out here, it's like you're at the grocery store, tellers checking your things out. And it's like, hey, how's it going? Hey, how are you? Like, how's your day? You just sit there and have a conversation. People are just so nice here. And it's very easy to meet people. Everyone's easygoing, just kind of a low stress lifestyle, slow paced lifestyle is really, really awesome for us anyway. Might not be for everybody, but for us, it was what we needed and what God put us, the path God put us on, and for a good reason. And we believe we're living that out now. So wrap it all up there, right? So we started with kind of our story. We talked about lifestyle. We talked about schools. We talked about expenses, weather, friends. We talked about a lot of stuff. So, you know, I hope I was able to give you some good value. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments below. I'll answer them there. But if you're thinking about moving out here to Houston, you know, I have the blessed opportunity to help people just like y'all that were just like us back in 2017, 2018, when we were just trying to figure it all out, right? So I get to use my experience to help you make your move out here to Houston and make Houston your next home. And I love it. I appreciate it. I'm grateful for it. It's been so great talking to y'all, getting to know y'all and helping y'all move out here to Houston and making new friends, which has been the best part of it all, honestly. It's just about building these relationships and, you know, having people out here that I know. Now, you know me when you move out here, but really, really awesome place. We love it. We'll go ahead, wrap it up. But as always, I appreciate you. God bless you. I'll see you on the next one.